is the License Commission decision hearing Thursday, October 30th, 11:30 a.m. on the Michael J. Lombardi Building, 831 Mass Ave, basement conference room. For review, our Commissioners Chair Andrea Jackson and Commissioner Haas. Be aware that this hearing is being audio taped and videotaped. First matter is the application of Shandong Dumpling House Incorporated doing business as Dumpling House. Jim Sloan, manager, holder of the common liquor license at 950 Mass Ave, has applied for a new wine and malt beverages restaurant license at said address. The already approved hours and capacity will remain changed. This is located at Capitol.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
James Rafferty on behalf of the applicant. Seated to my right is Adam Bing, B-I-N-G. And you want to give me the name?
Yeah, G Sloan. Spell it. G-I-N-G-S-L-O-A-N-E.
One moment, please. Excuse me, if you'd like to videotape, that's fine. However, standing right there in the way in which you're doing it is very disruptive. So I'd like to ask if you could please step back. If you could please step back, sir. So let me be clear. Can you please step back toward the door? It's just very disruptive where you're at. Thank you.
This is disruptive right here.
Where you were standing at, directly behind them was disruptive, yes.
How about this?
That's fine.
Okay.
Mr. Rafferty, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As was suggested at the last month's meeting, we did convene a meeting with the residents of the condominium association where the restaurant is located. You recall that Mr. Bing has been operating his business now for approximately 6 months. So I prepared a memo. I hope the board has had an opportunity, the commission has an opportunity to see it, summarizing the events. It was I would describe it as a well-attended meeting, generally positive meeting with most residents expressing support for the restaurant and the manner in which it was operated. But I did identify several areas of concern that were noted, and we're proposing remediation on each of those. Some of the work that we're proposing to be done has already commenced. I just learned today that the sound insulation between the new ceiling tiles between the ceiling of the restaurant and the floor above is already taking place this week. And I have some photographs of that work.
And is that the work, Council, that you submitted in terms of the quote that was attached?
No, that's the exhaust work.
The exhaust work,
And
okay.
that's been approved now by the management company since we had the meeting, and an engagement letter and retainer check have been sent to the contractor Seidman Brothers, and that work is probably expected in the next week or two. That was one of the more informative aspects of this exploration. The kind of had a forensic analysis of the existing exhaust system, and it was found to have many shortcomings. This was an inherited system from the prior operator, and the shortcomings involved the location of the equipment, exhaust equipment on the roof. There was some covering over it that was creating excessive noise and vibrations, and then the opinion of the exhaust company was not allowing the odors to emanate correctly into the air, and was causing them actually to back up. They also believe that the cleaning, even though Mr. Bing has contracted with the cleaning service, was having the 3-month cleanings as required. The feeling of the contractor was that they were not adequate. That their inspection of the exhaust shaft was that they were not being properly cleaned. So this new company is providing new, in addition to their installation work, they provide ongoing maintenance. And we reviewed the features of the maintenance work with the management company, because the recommendation is there are actually locations in the building. The exhaust obviously the shaft begins in the restaurant that goes up to the building to the roof, and there are locations in the corridor of the building that the cleaner needs to get access to so they can do interim cleaning along the length of the shaft as it goes up the building, and that's been arranged. So we're anticipating as I said, that work being completed. So that addresses the noise and the exhaust. The sound issues, we've proposing a few alternatives, including creating an interior waiting area.
Can I just stop you for a minute?
Yeah.
So the exhaust piece, you said it's an ongoing, so that means it's going to be more frequent than the 3 months, or it's just going to be more thorough in terms of the cleaning?
I would say more thorough. I think the 3 months is to be adequate, but it's two things. It will be, if you had an opportunity to review the invoice, it's an enhancement of the system itself,
Right.
including a new fan and a reworking of creating some vibration stabilization on the roof. But going forward, a new method and a more extensive method of cleaning the exhaust than has happened previously by a new vendor, by this vendor. So, frankly, what the licensee did is he inherited the system and he inherited a company that had been cleaning it. He had his certificates showing it was being cleaned every 3 months, but the contractor was helpful in pointing out that they thought that the work was not effective. So, that's the odor and exhaust issue. The noise issue, which we've tried to address both inside the restaurant in terms of the sound, reducing insulation in the ceiling. There was typical ceiling tile and then a vacuum between them. We, after the neighborhood meeting of the residents, we had an opportunity to tour the premises with one of the residents and her attorney that was particularly susceptible to noise because she has the unit right above this one. We identified we could put it here and there, and Fiona made the decision to install this insulation throughout the ceiling of the restaurant. So that process has been undertaken. Is it completed now? Complete.
I don't want to touch it, oh, it's doing, it might have caused signal. Well, I have to do one or two things. Wait, see what it does. I can just make it a flat.
But you won't lose what you have there.
No,
Let's just make it a problem.
I just think it caught a signal, and so it's a little overloaded. So, do you mind taking the time to do that? Okay. I apologize.
No.
No. Any more chance for that police station?
This one is really what it was. So you can pick it up.
Thank you.
All right. So let's just close this for starting.
did have an opportunity to tour the restaurant with one of the residents who lives directly above it after the meeting in her attorney, and we were able to identify a few things. There's an exceptionally long vestibule as you first enter the restaurant from the street, and it amounts to a large corridor, so it could easily accommodate some seating or a bench or two, which would provide an alternative to people who wanted to stay inside when they were waiting. I recall one of the concerns is that, particularly on late in the week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, during peak dining hours, estimated between 6:30 and 8:30, people arrive and have to sometimes wait for their table. And most patrons are often standing on the sidewalk, and their conversations and such can sometimes affect the residents above. So we by identifying this area, we think people might be incentivized to stay inside. We also went into the restaurant and located an area in the back of the restaurant that's largely unused. It's not used for patron seating. It's used almost by the staff to have meals before the restaurant opens. In this area, we've looked at it, and it could easily take 4 small circular tables with 3 chairs, and we would create a seating area. So if people arrive and the table isn't ready, they could go to that area within the restaurant. They could.
But they won't be eating at that table,
They
correct?
would not be eating. There wouldn't be food service there. But we did contemplate that we could, as an incentive to get them to stay there, were the beer and wine license be issued, we thought that they might be able to serve them a glass of wine or beer as a incentive to keep them in the restaurant. This actually happens to be a more preferable location for waiting in the view of the resident, because the vestibule area is under her bedrooms. And as we looked at the restaurant, she found this area, which was deep into the restaurant, would actually be more preferable. So we're proposing a 12 seats in a waiting area, only for customers waiting for tables. As I said, the restaurant itself is successful, but is not a late night destination. They don't accept customers after 10 p.m. So generally on most nights, everyone is out of the restaurant by 11 o'clock. That's even true on weekend nights. So Mass Ave, those blocks of Mass Ave are relatively active at those hours, so I don't think that these customers or these patrons would be changing the overall conditions on the street in this area. And again, these are patrons who would be coming to the restaurant anyway. They're not going to have a bar. They're not going to allow for wine or beer service if there's anything other than a complimentary food service. This is very much a restaurant, great attention, focused on the menu, cuisine, kitchen staff, and preparation. So it's a full-service restaurant, open for lunch and dinner, serving a significant local population, high percentage of walk-in trade, and is contained in the record many hundreds of signatures by patrons, mostly from Cambridge, expressing a desire to be able to have a glass of wine or beer with their meal. It's for this reason that the applicant would ask that the commission consider allowing them to demonstrate that they can effectively hold a beer and wine license. I think the first 6 months of operation under the CD license has proven to be successful. I know Ms. Lint had the opportunity to attend the resident meeting, and I must say it was not just trying to spin it. It was a very positive meeting, and the residents, in my estimation, even the residents that had concerns spoke well of the operators and the attempt to be responsive to issues. So there was a time quite a while ago where the commission had kind of a 6-month policy, I recall, on things like this, that an operator could come in, couldn't actually apply for beer and wine license for 6 months to essentially prove their credibility and their effectiveness at operating a restaurant. I would say that is what has occurred here since the issuance of the CD license. The commission can look at a record here of performance, and we're hoping that the commission would be able to conclude that with the types of mitigation measures that we're proposing, that the licensee would be given an opportunity to serve beer and wine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know that we also received correspondence from Attorney Franzel. And typically, we don't allow testimony, new testimony at the decision hearing, but I would like to give him an opportunity to be heard.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, sorry.
So you mentioned with the, there's two waiting areas. There's one you're envisioning in the vestibule with some
Yes.
benches, and then there's one that's further towards the back of the restaurant,
Right.
where you mentioned that there's an opportunity for patrons to get drinks while they're waiting. So, oh,
No, go ahead.
am I getting ahead?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
No, that's great.
So I'm just trying to, I know you've represented the beer and wine license as being principally to complement dinner. I'm just trying to figure out if you have this other piece of the operation, and I appreciate why you're trying to do it.
Right, no, I
Get
think
the patrons
it's
to
a
come to the
legitimate
restaurant.
question, and it's not the intention, and we would not want it to become a lounge or have the appearance of a lounge. Frankly, it was a bit of brainstorming with the neighbors about, well, what is it that we could do to incentivize people to remain in, particularly in the warm weather, in the good months. If you have a 5 or 10 minute wait, it's a busy, active restaurant. It might be that some patrons may simply prefer to stand outside in the sidewalk and have a conversation. So we thought of it as a way to possibly incentivize waiting patrons to remain in. I would say it's not critical to our operation. It was only offered it as a suggestion to, as I said, incentivize patrons to wait while they're in the restaurant. But I had the same thought about, well, we wouldn't want this to morph into some type of lounge, which is not what it is. If you saw it physically, it's really just the corner of the restaurant. But we certainly wouldn't serve anything in the vestibule, but
Right.
but the area where the service bar would be right there. I thought, well, maybe if someone had a 20-minute wait, and we said, well, if you sat there, we could give you a glass of wine, they may choose to do so. So that's the thinking behind it, but I understand the caution.
Typically, what is the waiting time for patrons that do come when the restaurant's at its full operations?
10 minutes.
So you can turn it over that quickly in 10 minutes, so you're not having people sitting there upwards to an hour, hour and a half waiting.
No, usually not that long. Yeah.
They have recently instituted an online, the German was online reservation system. They didn't have that earlier.
Right.
So it has, they've reported to me, it has improved.
Okay.
I was gonna say,
wait
was that to
times.
help cut down with the wait time?
Exactly, because
And they also can call you to make a reservation.
Okay.
So just to avoid a big group of people waiting outside.
Okay.
Good morning. I am Attorney Jonathan Franzel, and this is Debbie Koplow.
Good morning. If you could please, Jill, do you have it, or do you need it?
I just like it for the record
If you could
anyway.
please state your name for the record again louder, if you could please spell your first and last name along with your client, please.
Certain Jonathan, Jonathan, Franzel, Franzel, and Debbie, Debbie, Koplow, Koplow. I agree with almost everything Mr. Rafferty has said. The steps that they have taken have proven to be very constructive, as if their intention is to be terrific neighbors. There remain a couple of issues that exist. I don't know when the insulation was installed, but as recently as last night, Ms. Koplow was still able to hear the scraping of chairs on the floor and the dull murmur of conversation downstairs. Another issue which was not mentioned is that of smoke on the street from patrons waiting outside. I think that the steps that have been taken and have been suggested to bring the patrons into the restaurant are extremely helpful in mitigating the number of people that would be waiting outside. But I would like to see signage outside saying no smoking, or on this building, there's a sign that says no smoking within 25 feet of the building. I'd like to see something like that, a universal symbol for not smoking, in order to discourage people waiting to get into the restaurant from smoking underneath my client's window. Steps such as enabling customers to make reservations. I heard talk of pagers that would be given to patrons so that they wouldn't have to wait underneath my client's window. And the seating area in the back of the restaurant, I think are all very constructive in terms of reducing the number of people that will be waiting outside. Those are really the main concerns that remain. And I believe that we would waive an objection to the beer and wine licensing if those steps are taken and signage is in place and the sound deadening beefed up some. I'm not sure if the seating in the vestibule will be great unless the sound deadening is improved, because as you mentioned, it's under Ms. Koplow's bed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Revere, if you'd like to have your client come back, it's fine.
Okay.
Just in case there are any follow-up questions.
In response to the suggestion, all of these measures are intended to be responsive to concerns expressed by management, particularly Ms. Koplow. So if the vestibule seating doesn't turn out to be an improvement, we certainly would modify it. But you can take a look at how the sound deadening is worked.
So the inside waiting hasn't been established yet in terms of the operations?
Right, no, I mean, I think it wouldn't involve much more than buying a couple of benches or seats, so it's not a very extensive.
Yeah, right now it's, they've left some chairs outside, temporary views. They didn't install the bench yet, but
They've taken a few of the typical restaurant chairs and have put them into the vestibule. But, it just struck me that it happens to be an exceptionally sized vestibule. It's not the typical you open the door and then 2 steps you're in. It's this almost like a long narrow queuing area that would, if you were there and you were waiting in the rain, it would be, I'm sure people must wait there in inclement weather as opposed to standing on the sidewalk. The signage was a big part of what we've done. We agreed to provide a copy of the sign and have at least 2, if not 3 signs posted promoting awareness among patrons of the close proximity of residents and request to be respectful. I'm sure Attorney Franzel would agree, we probably have a limited ability to restrict conduct on the public way. The sidewalk is beyond perhaps our ability to enforce a smoking restriction, but we're happy to try to encourage self-regulating. But I wouldn't want the licensee to have to be responsible for enforcing conduct on the sidewalk that might otherwise be permitted, and create that type of conflict where they would be attempting to tell people.
So how does your client feel about amending the sign just to incorporate, especially in the front of the restaurant, to try and dissuade or discourage patrons from smoking out immediately outside the restaurant? I mean, again, I think you're right. I don't think you can enforce it, but I think make people aware of the fact that it is a troubling behavior for the area residents. But I think most people would be respectful of that.
We had talked about a policy which we put on the sign that if you do smoke, you have to wait 5 additional minutes to deceive it.
5 more minutes of smoking, 5 more minutes under the window.
But we the true things that said in jest, the thinking being that I think through perhaps humor and other measures, you can create some atmosphere or awareness around that, and that's what we said in the signage. We might try to be a little cheeky or a little clever to try to at least draw people's attention to this problem. So.
So I think your clients have done a great job with at least trying to work with the residents, and I think they've run a clean shop for the last, what, 6 months, has it been? I appreciate the meeting and hope that you continue the dialogue with the residents of the building. I think that that's very important, and it seems as though you have tried to address all the concerns raised. So based on that, I would like to make a motion that we approve the application for the beer and wine license with the proposed 12 seats in the waiting area, but alcohol not be served to those people who were waiting. I think as you had discussed, the alcohol would just be table service, and that's the way I would like it to remain. And subject this to a review in 6 months. Is there a second?
Sure.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
You're all set.
I'm assuming the representations in our memo would serve as conditions on the license, and we're happy to live with that in terms of.
Yes, in terms of everything that you've agreed
Yeah.
to with, I mean, I really see that as between your client and the condo board and the residents, but I would assume that if this is what you've represented and this is what you've agreed to, and you will take care of it.
Understood.
And I'm sure if you haven't, then when you come back in 6 months, we'll know about it.
Right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Application Group Zoom Incorporated, doing business as Bridge. Matthew George, CEO, has applied for a jitney license to operate 8 routes in Cambridge. The routes are available